Welcome back, guys. Apologies for not being able to get an episode out to you guys last week. I was sicko, so you didn't want to hear that over an hour. I am just getting recovered. So, with that, Corstian, how are you? I know you're very excited about the draft, and you obviously have Ty Simpson as your QB1. So, how are you feeling about those odds there?
Yeah, Ty Simpson's QB1 because Mendoza sucks, right? Isn't that how we're supposed to do takes these days or something?
Yep. Yep. Just maybe that's what we need to do to get the
Mhm.
reels going and get the viewership
Yeah,
on that.
yeah. Like Jamar Chase is the de facto number one, unarguable, because Jefferson, JSN, Puka aren't actually that good. Like, there's tons of flaws in their game. Therefore, by default, Chase has to be number one.
Okay, hold on. I do not love Jamar Chase that much.
I'm just making fun of the argument style that somebody made.
Yeah.
I'm not roasting you. I'm just doing an NFL kind of funny example that
I do love me some Jamar Chase, but yeah. Around this time of the year, you don't see nuance, and hopeful to. Actually, we're bringing in kind of a lighter episode this week, but we're talking about realistic landing spots because obviously, at this point of the draft season, you guys are familiar with a lot of the big names, Love, Downs. Like, a lot of people play Dynasty. Looking at receivers, I know we have our draft coming up soon after the draft, NFL draft happens, but. A lot of these big names, you're probably thinking like, where are they going to go? Because there's always like a case where people slip and fall. Like one mock draft, I saw Sonny Styles is being picked at number 12. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. It happens. You have these cases like, so I'm trying to think of an example. Like Jalen Carter was supposed to be number 1. He fell. Laramie Tunsil, like those kind of guys, not just QBs and wide receivers and whatnot. So we'll kind of do a breakdown there. Corstian, why don't you go ahead and start, because I know you have a lot of prospects you want to get through.
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of exciting prospects, but I don't know. I was just thinking a lot about Jeremiah Love. I feel like he's been talked about more so as kind of like at least on the offensive side of the ball, the generational offensive kind of talent who could be better, who at least tested better than Ashton Genty did last year in a lot of metrics, and so people are really high on Jeremiah Love. And so it's always tricky with like the running back position of how high does a running back deserve to get drafted? Because we've seen throughout, like, I don't know, for the past while, I guess, every once in a while we'll see a running back go in that top 10 pick selection. I mean, namely like Saquon was high, Leonard Fournette was a high pick. I think Josh Jacobs was a relatively high first-round pick. Ezekiel Elliott was a first-rounder, I believe. I said Ashton Genty, I think maybe not. Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. Travis A-Chain, now that we know. All first-round picks. And so it's like, how, I guess it's like the idea of like, where does he compare? This mock draft that I have pulled off on, it's like from NFL.com, Lance Zierlein. He has Jeremiah Love going number 4 overall. And while I think he has the pedigree to be drafted that high, I don't know how beneficial it would necessarily be for the Titans to take Jeremiah Love at that position. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if it's wise for the Titans to go, but I see how it can make Cam Ward's life easier. If it were up to me, I'm probably more of a Cardinal Tate kind of guy. I think you give Cam Ward a bona fide number 1 weapon. He has some promising receiver talents around him. That would be where I would go personally. Or give Salah like a defensive anchor around Jeffrey Simmons at edge. I would even focus there. I just don't know if running backs the answer. I've seen like Mina Kimes talk about like, oh, what about the Washington Commanders? but the Commanders have signed so many running backs, like Rashad White, especially. So I could see that as a possibility. Maybe the Bengals, but the Bengals, if they don't pick an edge, they're just never going to believe in defense. So a couple names there. Maybe the Browns or the Giants might bite if they're not confident in Judkins or Cam Skadden coming off of injuries. But, Titans seem like the most realistic scenario if it's going to be top 5. I just don't see the Cardinals doing it because if I'm the Cardinals, I'm looking to 2027 for my quarterback. I'm not looking, but not at 3. At 3, I'm thinking about okay, if I have a quarterback that's going to step in at 2027, whether free agent size or draft, how do I build the infrastructure around him? You cannot rely on Elijah Wilkinson long term. And I'll be looking at tackles or maybe some of the Miami guys at edge, to kind of build up the team around the quarterback. But it's an interesting discourse. But I don't know if the Titans are going to fully commit to it. I could see them do it.
Yeah, because with the Titans or the Titans, I mean, the running back room isn't elite by any means. I mean, it's Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, but I feel like for a team that was as bad as they were last year, I'm just trying to think of it just feels like running back wasn't the reason why they struggled as much as they did, And sure, they brought in so I like your idea of getting a Carnell Tate or going wide receiver with that pick or potentially trading down. I think they're a likely candidate for that. Just looking at this team, because I mean, wide receivers, you got Calvin Ridley, who's an all right 2. You got Wan'Dale Robinson, who I think is maybe the best guy on this team right now. I mean, he just had 1,000 yards with the Giants, so props to him for that. And then you got Alec Aymenor and Shimmery Dike. And so it's this interesting hodgepodge of guys. Gunnar Helm was decent in moments last season, so I mean, I see why they were kind of okay maybe letting go of Chiga Conquo. And then they got Bellinger, who's whatever, but yeah. But so realistically, would love, honestly, more than the Commanders. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs potentially go for him, but then it's so I guess it would be Giants I'd see as a likely spot. Chiefs is a likely spot. And then I go further down the board, and then it's not, I mean, at a certain point, it's well, I guess we take him because he's best player available. What Vikings, I guess maybe would be on the higher end of that list with an older Aaron Jones and basically essentially not handing the reins to Jordan Mason. Right? Is that his name? Jordan Mason.
You think the Vikings would trade up for him though?
I don't think the Vikings would trade up for him, but they would seem like a good team that would take him if he falls to 18.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna fall. That's the thing.
That's the thing. But then it's I'm just trying. Yeah, so I'm the teams that I think draft him are the Giants and the Chiefs in the top 10, and then well, because with the Dolphins you got A-Chain, and so unless you're moving off of A-Chain, right? Cowboys, sure, Love would be cool, but Javonte Williams had a career year season with them last year. I think they have more issues than just running back, especially with how strong their offense is. The Rams are a potential option, but I do like Kyron Williams, and then I do like Blake Corum as well. And so it's that doesn't seem likely. Maybe the Panthers, because what you got Miles Sanders, and then potentially Jonathan Brooks, but then you got TN or A-Chain, my bad. That mix, but then so it's a few teams that I feel genuinely move. Maybe Jet 16 could take him. if they want to move off of Brees, they feel like they get value off. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it cut out there, but I got some of the gist of it. I think Rams would be a definitely hard sell because they have the infrastructure there. Ravens, I wouldn't rule them out because Derrick Henry's getting up there, and I could see Jeremiah Love and Henry kind of split the situation there. I could see that happening. But they're a type of team that I could also see take Caleb Downs where they're at right now. So, yeah. I think you're selling me more and more in the Vikings, but now with like the resurgence in the ground attack and then what we saw in Seattle, like how much success they've had, the two-headed monster. I also wouldn't be surprised if we see teams with kind of like an established guy already. Still not be afraid to take Jeremiah Love that high. Like you could see the Cowboys doing it, where they're like not necessarily. They'd be idiotic to do so, in my opinion, because they have so many secondary needs. Like I wouldn't shy away from having a Javonte Williams, Jeremiah Love kind of backfield, and you could see a lot of teams operate that. Like Tampa Bay could also follow suit in that same model. So, I think there's a certain level where you don't want to pass up on the guy with the skill set that he has there. I think it's really important to have a ground game. Especially with the way the league is trended. So there is value, and I think we come a long way from the how much value is a running back kind of discourse because people are like, oh, you could just get one in the later rounds, which is still potentially true, but the high end talent is still really important.
Yeah. So who's the guy you're interested in talking about for your first, I guess, prospect?
I think I'll go on the defensive side. A lot of pass rushers. There's a lot of depth. I guess once you look below Arvell Reese, who would be kind of the second edge rusher taken? Because there's a lot of really different flavors you get. Like if you look at David Bailey out of Texas Tech, extremely fast guy. Like he's gonna get to the ball as soon as possible, but I think kind of his instincts and like pass coverage and kind of like instincts against like professional like offensive tackle in the league. Like how do you play with like a bull rush and spin moves? Like I think secondary counter moves is where you would need to work on the most. So it just really depends on what you're looking for. Is kind of where I'm going. Like Ruben Bain, I think to me, he's the guy I'd probably put number 2. I think this is the kind of time of year when you're seeing like ridiculous takes about his short arm and like, oh, his get off speed is like so. I think he's exactly what you need in a pass rusher, and like short arms are sometimes like advantageous in different scenarios. So he's a guy I'd probably put like as the edge number 2, like who I would target if Arvell Reese is off the board after 2, which is what I highly expect to happen. And they got his teammate at Messidor. So there's a lot of different talents. I'm really excited to see who gets picked second, third, and like which teams end up picking him, because edge rusher is always a need unless you're the Giants. So like, do the Cardinals go tackle, or do they go after the second edge rusher? What about the Browns with the Miles Garrett situation? What do the Commanders do? What do the Saints do? Chiefs could end up going to edge. Bengals need one so badly. So I'm really excited to see what those teams at the top 10 decide to do in the like rich edge class.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of teams in that top 10, like just namely having the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Commanders, I guess the Saints with how they kind of performed in the back half of the season. All top 10 picks, but like teams that have somewhat of a competitive expectation heading into this upcoming season. I don't know how often. I'd have to look back at like every season's top 10 picks or top 10 selection landing spots or whatever. But I don't know. It just seems impressive, I guess, that we have so many potentially strong competitive teams picking so early in the draft, which I think does shake things up. But yeah, I think I know you mentioned like the Cardinals is kind of like the next team to pick, like I guess the second best pass rusher, assuming that you have the Jets taking one of their first pick.
I assume they're taking Reese.
And I think Cardinals do follow suit in terms of picking another pass rusher. Just simply like the defense as a whole is a huge weakness on the Cardinals team. Like it really is Buda Baker versus the world when it comes to defense for that team. Whereas like sure, like Jacoby Brissett really, I mean, isn't that great, but he was always in a situation where he just had to air the ball out nonstop, which led to his ridiculous stats that he would have playing as starter with the Cardinals. And I mean, I think a big part of that comes from the fact that the defense couldn't stop anybody, and so it forces the offense to, run in a way that forces Jacoby Brissett to just pass, and get 50 attempts a game. And so, getting a guy like, David Bailey, there's team like you said, Messidor, like, Bain, Bailey, Messidor, Falk, like just having an establishing another defensive piece, I think is almost a must, whether it be an edge or another key position that they're a particular fan of or they're really high on.
I think the only thing that would stop me if I'm the Cardinals is because this is a really deep class.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just go ahead and take your tackle of the future at 3 and then build it up for, again, the quarterback at 2027?
Mm-hmm.
And then start the second round because you have the number 34 pick, right? And to take a guy like TJ Parker if he falls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could address edge because they do have Josh Sweat. And then continue building around. It's a very deep class where, like, I'm seeing even in mock drafts here, like, let's see. Like, TJ Parker is falling to 46. Mason Thomas falling at 47.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Miller, defensive tackle out of Georgia, 48. So there's a lot of options. Like, even if you want to go cornerback with D'Angelo Pons, like, he's getting mocked at 51, and I really like the talent there personally. So I just think for Carter, you got to really think about, like, how do we get better quarterback play and how do we build the infrastructure around it, because we have so much talent offensively there, and the defense will come. I feel in the right situation, but especially under your new head coach, I think it's really important to get a good foundation and structure in place as well.
Yeah.
Just trying to play devil's advocate, I agree. I think at the top of the board, like at number 3, you definitely don't want to miss on any of these edges. But if you're the Cardinals, you also have to think about, because edge is a deep class, like, again, is that edge number 2 that much different than edge number 8 or 9? You don't see that much difference in your draft board or your grades, then you could go ahead and make that selection. You'd look at the other position groups and say, okay, what's the difference between tackle number 2 and tackle number 9? Is it as drastic, or it's more drastic, or is it as close as edge? And I think you make the decision that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, what do you got for me?
Okay. Next one. I feel like it's been actually, I haven't been keeping too much track of, like, a lot of the hype versus, like, downplay on some specific prospects, but one that at least I've kind of heard a lot of ups and downs about was Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon, where he, like, has the measurables, like, in terms of just being a pure athlete, to be an insane tight end, but throughout college he really hasn't performed, like, or put up the numbers that you'd really expect out of a tight end of, like, his physical caliber. And people even talk about how, like, he could honestly have just been the second best tight end on his team, yet he's getting mocked to be a potential first round talent. Like, I guess like I don't personally see him or think that he should be drafted in the first round. If you draft him in the first round, you're drafting him almost as a pure project player that like you're expecting to maybe be good and look after like 3 years or so. But again, that's not somebody you draft in the first round, at least in my opinion. But like he just kind of has at least underwhelmed me outside of the combine. Like the combine, he looks fantastic, but then you go back and see the tape and you're like, it's not as fantastic. It almost kind of reminds me of like Noah Fant in some ways. I mean, I feel like Noah Fant had more production under his belt, but like Noah Fant was extra hyped up just due to being fast, I guess, as a tight end and who can play basically as like a slot tight end position. And I feel like that's a lot of what the hype behind Sadiq is, but without like actually seeing it in practice. It's like not necessarily like what team you think you get drafted to, but like what round do you think he like should be going in?
I still think he's a first round talent. I no longer think he should go top 10, top 15, really. He's one of those guys, like he's getting drafted because of the athleticism and the mismatches he can create with it. But then it's just a matter of like, what system is he going into? I think that's probably where my question goes, not necessarily. I'm trying to look for the mocks to see where he's getting picked right now. I think that would kind of guide. So, Baltimore Ravens, I like that fit for him with Lamar Jackson because you've seen it. You see Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely both thrive in those systems, and he would be a good like. He would get utilized with a Mark Andrews in that environment. Like I think that would be a good landing spot for him. And then, like other mock drafts, I see him getting picked. Let's see. Oh, I'm still scrolling and I can't find him. Okay. I see him getting picked to the Buccaneers, and I'm like, okay. He'll get the volume because now you don't have Mike Evans. And you got dealing with Chris Godwin and Mecca Buka. But is he a good fit with Baker Mayfield? And will Baker Mayfield maximize him? I don't really know at this stage of Kenyon Sadiq going into the league, which has to learn the nuances. I think in a Tampa Bay scheme, he might not be the best fit. But like on the Ravens with Lamar, where you're kind of playing backyard football, like he could definitely thrive in those situations where like Lamar will find the mismatch and make it work. I think in a more structured like offense, like West Coast scheme, it'll take him a couple of years to pick up the nuances. But like in a team that allows him to like play to his talent right away, like I think it can be an instant impact guy. It's kind of like one of those discussions with like Colston Loveland versus Tyler Warren. Like if Kenyon Sadiq's used the same way as Tyler Warren, I think he could be really successful right at the get-go. But if it's like a Colston Loveland situation where he has to understand Ben Johnson's scheme and like all the little things within his scheme and as a tight end on top of that, you have blocking responsibilities. You have to lean onto that part in order to create deception off play action when you should be blocking or block and release and understanding those nuances there. I think it'll take him a little bit of time. It might take him to mid-season of his rookie year. It might take him into like year 2, year 3. That's highly variable versus like getting check downs and getting mismatched, like created spots and being put in positions where you can just drive as a pass catcher. That's kind of where his success will vary.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like I almost feel like it's the opposite for that because like he was the bad yards after catch guy at Oregon, like, and that's kind of what Tyler Warren was predominantly doing. Like he was on the receiving end of a lot of screens and like designated like short yard catches that he would kind of turn it into something. Whereas like Loveland was, I mean, played more as like a down, like he would obviously block to his like tight end, but I feel like had a lot of production as a downfield receiver, which is where I guess he had more of his highlights of making those like getting open and making a contested catch.
But I'm thinking about like him and for example, like the Ravens aren't retaining DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Mhm.
And they're not having Isaiah Likely on the roster anymore.
Yeah.
Who are you going to go to in the red zone? This is a perfect guy that can slide in and do that because he's really great at that spots and situations. So, like, situationally, I could see him be great there versus Tampa. Like, you don't really need him to be that guy in that kind of scenario. Like, you have Godwin, you have Ibuka that can create separation and like, get those looks. You know?
Yeah. I mean, so that's what I meant with just like I feel like he falls on he fits under a Colston Loveland type archetype more than he does the Tyler Warren, which I was just like, it feels like it was opposite to.
Okay.
Because I feel like, again, Warren was very effective with his yards after the catch versus Loveland was a better downfield receiver, at least from what we saw last season. I'm sure they could both do kind of both, like all of the above. But within that Ravens offense, like you said, which I do think is honestly a valid landing spot for him. If he does go in the first round here, but being that guy in the red zone, I think falls is better in a Colston Loveland type play calling system than what we saw with the Colts and Tyler Warren.
I think I'm more like being critiquing on the blocking and like the route running portion of it, like where you have to be like a nuanced route runner, like which is extremely unfair to ask of tight ends in general, right? Usually the best of the best, like route runners, Bowers, like Trey McBride, like tight ends aren't asked to do that. It's just kind of like a skill that they should not have that make them extreme unicorns. Like I don't think Sadiq is the next Bowers, if that's what we're talking about. Yeah. And I know that's an extreme case, but like the way he plays his game, like he's a great tight end, not like an elite tight end yet. And in order to reach that elite tight end ceiling is very context dependent. So it could end up in a situation where he thrives in the exact same ways that Colston Loveland does on the field. But I think the process for him to get to where Colston Loveland wins as a process needs a little bit of development. So we're kind of looking at it in two different ways.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. So you mentioned Kenyon, right? Just trying to keep track here because I already lost track.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Kenyon, Sadiq, and Love were my two guys that I had brought up.
Okay. I think for me, it's going to be the receivers. So it's kind of a two-party here. It's like, what flavor of receiver are teams going to target early? Because you got Tate, Tyson, and Lemon at the top. Personally, I like Arnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon more so than Tyson. They're kind of like the type I like where they can win all over the field. They can win with separation. Like a lot of people think Arnell Tate's just an outside Z receiver, but I think he's a lot more than that as well. And I think they're ball winners at the same time. But Tyson, I think there's a little bit more. He's like I think he's Puka in the sense where he wins with athleticism a lot. And I don't know if obviously you have the injury history, but injuries happen in the league at different points of the year. But I think with him, it's just more, does he understand the nuances? Does he understand like different parts of the catch? I have a lot more questions with Tyson than I do with the other two guys at the top. I'm curious to see where all three of them will land, because if Tyson lands in LA, it might not be the death knell for him as if he lands with the New York Jets.
Yeah.
Which I know the vacuum sounds absurd, but I think for his specific receiver type, I think the landing spot will matter more so, where I think if Lemon or Carnell Tate land with the Giants, I'm not concerned even with the Malik Neighbors in the fold. I think they can still be really good receivers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like and also I just think like draft position, really matters a lot where they end up getting selected, because like I saw this one thing just the other day, I think, talking about the success rate of wide receivers taken in the top 15 versus the bottom 15 of the first round. And like the bottom 15 of the first round's hit rate feels incredibly low, where it feels like more busts, or busts than even average to above like wide receiver talent basically coming out of that spot, which I thought was really surprising, because you're like, oh, like a first round receiver is a first round receiver. So I can, if he's probably going to be at least all right if he's taken in the first round. But so if like teams view, like, I mean, Tyson, I feel like we're saying is kind of the weakest of the three in terms of like how good we view him. At least the other two feels like almost regardless of where they land, they probably will be good, but Tyson might need a better scheme, I guess, to be kind of to reach those highs, at least initially. And so if teams do see Tyson as a guy that should be taken higher in this first round, I think it'll feel easier to have confidence in him going into his rookie season, versus if like teams let him fall to like, I don't know, like pick 24 and like the Browns take him or something, and then at that point I'm like, oh, I guess like I'd have a lot more question marks about how good Tyson might actually be, which is kind of just
I'll be a little bit more specific on Tyson. I think the thing that concerns me with him is you see him a lot. He'll do a lot of the good things that you want elite wide receivers to do, where he'll give like head fakes. He'll do like, if he's trying to win on the outside, where he's like starts on the inside and gives the moves to kind of like sell he's going inside and then just makes outside. The way he delivers those moves are like way too fast. Like, imagine if you're just pedaling your feet as soon as the ball is snapped, and you're just like running in place, but running as fast as you can in place the entire route, versus like changing your pacing and like at the top of your route just only using quickness to separate on top, post, or middle. Like, Tyson doesn't use patience in some of his routes, and I just think some of those things to pick up on and develop will take time. If you're in like a Jets kind of situation, or Browns or Cardinals situation, where you don't have the quarterback, you don't have the offensive system that allows that to develop over time, or like you have a coach that's harping on that, then he's gonna be the same type of player like week to week during that year, and it's up to him during the offseason to improve at it. Relative to like Lemon and Tate, where I don't have those concerns because they know how to vary pacing in their routes. So it's kind of just like a route running maturity kind of thing, where it's not a debt now on Tyson. Tyson can certainly develop it. But I think if I had to choose between the three receivers right now, where it's like, who am I expecting to be the next like Abuka or like Luther Burden, in my opinion, like it'd be one of those two guys.
Yeah.
But like 2 years from now, Tyson could be the best receiver out of this class because he's figured it out. So
yeah, I more or less agree with what you're saying. I was just saying, like, I feel like basically just seeing like how the general consensus of NFL teams within the first round, I think will give us a glimpse into how Tyson's like first couple seasons in the NFL may go. Whereas like I think we both see Lemon and Tate to be guys that are taken potentially as like top 10 or like, earlier first round type picks. And like the hit rates on guys taken, like wide receivers taken like the first 12 picks or so, just historically have been more often than not, they are really good wide receivers. And obviously you find good receivers throughout the rest of the draft, but then like guys that are considered pretty good, that still go in the first round, but in like kind of towards like picks 15 to 32, don't like pan out significantly less than guys taken in that first half of the draft. I mean, which is natural, right? Because I mean, they're taken in the first half for a reason, which is why I was saying if Tyson does fall later into that first round, like like a team like the Browns at 24, where Browns are a team that we're thinking could go wide receiver, just looking at their wide receiver room, right? Like going there, like they just statistically have a lot less success, I guess, at that draft, those like later draft landing spots, regardless of team. And so if he does fall later, I think sure he can learn to be a good receiver. Like Justin Jefferson was taken later in the first round, right? But then like literally Jalen Rager's right there. And we see a lot more of the Jalen Ragers than we do the Justin Jeffersons later in the first round. And so if he does fall, to these mid-20s, I think it would almost like, at least from a viewing perspective, it might be a cause for concern in terms of maybe like the odds of him being unsuccessful at the pro level might be higher.
Yeah, I was as you're describing, I was taking a look at some of I think the last situation where we're looking at like top 15 picks that were wide receivers that really didn't turn out well were like Corey Davis, Mike Williams, and John Ross in 2017. Like Corey Davis got picked with a 5th overall pick. Mike Williams, 7th. John Ross. And you can say, oh, Mike Williams had a couple good years, but you wouldn't really have expected that out of a 7th overall pick, where guys like, let's see here. Like, I'd argue Jerry Jeudy had better years than him. Then, like, a couple years later, you had Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith. I think they all performed better than Mike Williams, Drake London. With JSN, despite being picked like 12 picks below him and out of the top 15, like with a contract especially. Then you got Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Roma Dunze. Still holding out hope for Marvin Harrison, but like other than 2017, it's been a pretty good hit rate, like top 15. I think the jury's still out on Travis Hunter from last year, but we got to give them some more time. But I think if you want to expand that to the top like 32, it's an interesting discussion because in 2024 you got like where are we landing on Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Worthy, Xavier Leggett, Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, even though he's kind of like second round first pick. I think it's an interesting discussion to be had, like your course of, because we have 3 of these guys that are projected to be top 15, but are they really going to be picked top 15? That's another conversation we can go into. It's like, is one of them going to slide until 20 or 21?
Right. And so, yeah, that was kind of more or less a big point of mine, of just like not necessarily knocking on him as a prospect right now, but we'll get a glimpse into, I think, how teams really feel about him just simply based off where he goes in the first round, which I think is crazy, where we can almost predict with some kind of accuracy how successful a wide receiver taken in the first round will be based off if they're the first half or the second half of that first round.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend. I wasn't expecting that when I dug into it.
Right, because I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, a guy's taken in the first round, he'll probably be good. But then, yeah, it's like, I mean, I know you were looking through these picks too, but I look at like 2022, right? Like Jahan Dotson and Treylon Burks were the 2 wide receivers taken from 15 to 32 in that draft class, right? And you're like, I feel like we can comfortably say those 2 weren't as successful compared to Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London. And it's like JSN is kind of is like the outlier of the bunch, but then it's like, sure, like you have Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison in 23. And while like Flowers and Addison have proven to be decent receivers, they're not like game-breaking guys that you'd expect to come out of the first round. JSN's really the only of that bunch, but then Johnson hasn't really been that good, right? We look at Harrison, who I think can be good. I mean, sure, busts do happen in the top 10, right? I mean, that just happens inevitably on accident for teams. But Neighbors has looked good. Odunze's looked good. Brian Thomas looked good as year 1, but then year 2 had that steep drop off. Worthy, we'll see. Pearsall, we'll see. Leggett does not look really that good. But yeah, I know you kind of mentioned some of these guys already, but it's more so like a first round thing. And then I think once you reach the second round, I'm sure there's like a lot. You could do the math with a lot of this too if we go through and look at it all. But I feel like a lot of the expectations we have for a guy taken early in the second round is a lot different than a guy taken at the back end of the first for whatever reason. Because I feel like at least this season, this most recent season, Jaden Higgins and Luther Burden, two early second round guys, both looked really solid compared to their late first round counterpart in Matthew Golden.
And we can go into more detail, but I think some guys to keep an eye on in the second and third round that could outproduce some guys at the top we're looking at too. Chris Brazel, Jeremy Bernard, Omar Cooper. Like those are guys that could be the Lad McConkey of this draft. So that's guys to keep an eye on because we can get into it too. But like you look at some of the guys drafted in the second round, like George Pickens, Alec Pierce, like two of the highest paid guys right now out of their positions, like Michael Wilson, third round. So there are guys deep in the draft that can be good. Like I know this draft is considered as good as like other classes, but the talent is there, like among like top 50 overall. But all right, go on. I feel like I've taken up so much of time here.
No, that was the topic I was really interested in too. I mean, I saw it was maybe like a TikTok or something that someone was talking about those wide receiver trends of the first half versus the second half of the first round, and that and how you kind of just went about talking about it kind of reminded me of that. And so I thought it was a really interesting point to bring up, and obviously you kind of found it to be an interesting piece of how drafts, I guess, have panned out for wide receivers. And so you weren't really taking by time or anything at all, but I guess for me, it's less like a specific kind of players, but like I guess the position group of like kind of like the interior defensive linemen. I mean, we got like Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, Caleb Banks, Lee Hunter. It's kind of like, at least on one thing that I'm looking at, are like kind of the top 4 interior defensive line prospects. But like none of them are super highly rated like I feel like we've seen in the past couple seasons. And so it's like, do you think there are teams like in this mock draft on NFL.com that I'm looking at, I think the first interior defensive lineman I see off the board, where did he go? It wasn't early, but it was Caleb Banks to the Chargers at pick 22, and with kind of people just having that, I guess, initial assumption about the defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen based off your formation. I guess like, do you think? I'm wondering like what teams might reach, I guess, for a guy like Peter Woods, Caleb Daniels, just because it feels like there's a lot of, I guess, average-ish defensive linemen, and it doesn't seem like there's too many like top of the line prospects. And so because of that, if a team is looking for interior defensive line help kind of in the top half of the draft, knowing how, I guess, potentially thin this class is, I guess, do you envision or like do you have like teams as you look down like the draft board that you think might reach for one of these guys where we think maybe they don't deserve necessarily to go as high as like a top 10 pick?
Yeah, I don't think any of these guys deserve to go top 10, given where the other position groups are, to be quite honest. I was a little bit surprised when I heard Caleb Banks was going to be mocked to the Chargers at 22 because Chargers in particular have struggled with like injuries out of their top talents that they've drafted in the past. And Caleb Banks, actually the top guy taken here. I think he missed all of last year with injury, with foot injury. So like he probably carries the most risk, in my opinion, out of any of these. Like if I'm the Patriots and I'm like making a selection, like okay, I could see them take a Caleb Banks. They already have the infrastructure and defensive tackles where it's not going to be that much of a risk. But it is a first round pick that they're leaning towards that. I would probably look to Caden McDonald. He's probably a little bit more of a sure thing, and then Peter Wood would probably be the two guys that headed there. But those aren't guys that would I'd be like, oh, if we miss out on them, dang it. Like, unless we had a team needs. I think it's more just like this is the kind of draft where if you need a specific like rotational interior presence, like, oh, we've been bad at stopping the run. Like Caden McDonald would be higher ranked on my board than like a guy like Peter Woods or like Caleb Banks. Like because that's his specialty. But if you're looking for a pass rusher, I would look for more rotational guys that can fill in on third down rather than the answer here. If that kind of helps answer the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I just like it's just more so like, I mean, because I think any of these defensive tackles at that 22 spot almost feels like you're kind of reaching for it already. And so it's just the fact that it seems like a weaker than normal class. And like you said, I think a lot of teams are going to try to find rotational guys later in the draft simply due to just the depth of it. but you know, you're like, I think a point that you talk about, at least division GM Ontario or whatever, right, would be a guy that's specific position, like I don't know, like edge rush, let's say, have a lot of depth draft. So I'll pass up on taking actually or star pass up on a superstar edge rusher because there's so many I can in that second round. Do I take inner position as a tackle earlier, you know? And like obviously I don't think that's how everything you operate it would be, or that's how exactly you'd operate as a GM. But I feel like that bleeds into a little bit of your philosophy where you're willing to take or reach for a thinner position because you do see value later at maybe like deeper positions, even though you might need that too. You know?
Yeah, and just one more thing. Like I'm reading about guys like Rayshon Betty out of Michigan. Like on the opposite spectrum of like Caleb Banks, like Rayshon Benny only had his first startable year in 2025 because he had Mason Graham and like Kenneth Grant playing ahead of him in previous years. So like he's almost kind of like an incomplete study where you have to use like Senior Bowl and like combine and like on top of the games he played this year to kind of formulate an opinion where it's like that's the kind of guy where I'm like, okay, it could be a rotational player, but it could be so much more than that. And I would be comfortable taking that risk in like third and fourth round. Whereas with guys like Chris McClellan, like I'd feel perfectly comfortable taking with him as like a rotational guy. Let's see here. Another guy I'm reading about, Darrell Jackson. Like really good in the run game, but like he has a predictable pass rush. So it's kind of like, okay, if you need like a run stuffer, that's the guy you would get. Like for the Bears, if I have a Grady Jarrett, but we can't stop the run for our needs, like this is a good guy to get, for example. But I wouldn't break the bank on like top 15, certainly, top the second round, certainly. But like third round is when I'm starting to look at these guys like, oh, situational guy could be worth the look.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just more so like kind of a not really a case study, but like a thought study, almost thought experiment on kind of drafting philosophy on a position. I mean, because I think people in general kind of are slightly down on this draft in terms of certain like I mean, obviously we talked about defensive line here. You could even say quarterback is a pretty thin position. You know, we have like our top 3 wide receivers, but then after that, it's kind of a hodgepodge of like, how good are these guys kind of after these top 3 of Tyson, Lemon, and Tate? Tight end seems not as intriguing as like the past couple of years, you know, and so it'll be interesting to see how teams find value and are able to get guys to like work within their systems in what's considered a weaker class, I guess. But yeah.
Speaking of quarterbacks, what are good fits for Ty Simpson and Garrett Nussmeier? Because we're assuming that Bosa's going to Las Vegas. Like that's pretty much a given. I'm not more interested in who's going to be picked first, like Nussmeier or Simpson, or whether these guys are good. I'm more interested in like what would be good landing spots for guys like these who are not like people aren't excited about, like the Raiders are itching to get them and have a decision to make. People are more waiting on 2027, but where does Simpson and Nussmeier fit where they could be a Tyler Show, for example? Like, show some
Mhm.
promise at the end of the year where people are like, I don't know about them when they're drafted.
Yeah. I feel like like the Steelers and the Cardinals as like getting a guy later, like I don't know. I mean, Simpson I still think probably goes second or third round, like a day 2 guy. Nussmeier I think is like obviously a little bit later than that, right? But like I feel like those are 2 teams that if they could get value on like the quarterback position in this draft, without having to spend super high capital on it, would be guys that I think would be teams that I would think might be interested in going after a quarterback and like in hopes that they pan out. And then if they still suck regardless, you have next year as a stronger class. But like if you get one of those 2 guys and they turn out to be halfway decent, then you can spend a decent draft pick next year kind of just building around what you already know about your guy after one singular year. But I feel like those are 2 teams. I feel like, I mean, a spot I think either guy would probably would be like the Rams is like a 3rd to 4th round pick. Obviously, they'd want to get picked higher, but if the Rams pick one of those 2 or able to get one of those 2 in like the 4th round, I think that would be a personal ideal spot for them almost in terms of like wanting to develop under a strong system and, hopefully be the Matthew Stafford successor.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I was just about to say KC. I could also see as a good option because like how long are you getting Justin Fields and how long is Patrick Mahomes going to be out? I doubt we're going to see Patrick Mahomes playing in August, like scrimmaging in August. I think it's going to be like a really tight timeline for him. So I can see KC as a complete wild card. Go ahead and pick one of these guys. I really like the Steelers. I particularly really like Nussmeier to the Steelers. I think that's a great fit because he'll compete with Bill Howard, who they're high up. Aaron Rodgers, he might play for one more season, might play for 2 more. Who knows? I think he still has a decision to make in that regard. I'm starting to like Ty Simpson to Arizona more and more when I hear discussions on it. I don't know if Arizona's going to pull the trigger. I don't know if New York is the best fit for Ty Simpson. I think that's a trapdoor floor if I'm looking at it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, if I'm really any prospect, I don't want to go to the Jets.
I mean, yeah, but I just look at offensive structure. It's like I've had the Cardinals 10 times over the Jets, and they're incomplete. Even with all the skill weapons and stuff. You have Garrett Wilson. It's not totally lost in Brees.
Yeah.
You don't have an offensive structure yet. And that you already said it when mentioned the Jets. So we won't hash this out too long. But maybe the Dolphins? Do you go up Nussmeier if you're the Dolphins? Or I don't know. You already put a lot of money into Malik Willis. So I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger the first 2 rounds on these guys.
Right. I mean, what we saw the Falcons do sign a quarterback and draft one within the top 10. So I mean, I don't think I personally will ever count out the idea of signing a quarterback to a semi-expensive at the very minimum multi-year deal and then taking a quarterback at a relatively high draft spot. So
where did you have that draft class versus this draft class at QB2 and beyond?
Wait, say that again.
Where do you have QB2, assuming it's Simpson or Nussmeier, versus QB2 of that draft class, right? Because for me personally, I had Penix 2, I think, or 3 in that draft class.
Oh, my QB2 in that draft class was Drake May.
Okay. So, yeah, obviously you probably want Drake May over those 2 guys.
Yeah. My quarterbacks in that draft class was it was Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then it was like Bo, Penix, McCarthy.
Yeah, I think I had Caleb, Penix, and then I forget. I think I had Jaden 3,
Mhm.
or maybe it was May 3. I was really not high on Drake May coming out.
Mhm.
I remember that, but I remember talking about it was risky and whatnot. But like, my
Mhm.
point is, you're not gonna spend that much of capital to be put in that
Mhm.
position unless you're incompetent.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
I will say though, I do have Ty Simpson. I like him more as a prospect than I do JJ McCarthy. Like when looking back
okay,
at both their draft processes,
I can't disagree
but
with that.
but also I didn't see JJ McCarthy as a first round pick, at least talent wise. I mean, I understand why a team would take him in the first round, but personally, if I was a GM, I would not want to take McCarthy in the first round, and so that's kind of
So does that mean you want to take Simpson? Would you take Simpson in the first round?
like Simpson potentially like towards the very end of the first round. I think is probably the highest I'd feasibly want to take him at, because like McCarthy honestly, like it's hard to remember fully now, especially having seen JJ McCarthy play, but like McCarthy, I think McCarthy was really far down my own personal, like my personal draft board, where I would honestly, if I was the GM, I would have just completely stayed away from JJ McCarthy, because I didn't necessarily like all the college production that he had, unless he, like if he fell like really late and he was a value, I guess I would have taken him. But
You just didn't have much to go off of with JJ McCarthy. Like, you didn't have the reps to form your opinion. You're like, oh, we think we can be this. Look at all the potential he can bring.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, we didn't see him in these certain scenarios of how he's going to handle it. You had a lot of those questions, and in addition to the options you had in that draft class,
Mhm.
they're like, you would think, like, why would you go JJ McCarthy when you have a Michael Penix who has
Mhm.
played for so many years, Caleb, like
Mhm.
Drake May, like Jaden Daniel, the Heisman winner. Like, you just had so many options. We didn't feel like you needed to take JJ McCarthy. It was just more like
Yeah.
you
It's like,
were coming up with the rational reasons to pick him because of the traits and potential.
mhm. Yeah, and so like with Ty Simpson, like the biggest, like, I guess, alleged benefit of him to me is he kind of ran a more complicated offense at Alabama. Like, I think that's the biggest talking point I've heard about him. But like, additionally, it felt as if as the year went on, he kind of played worse. Is kind of one piece about Ty Simpson that I'm not a big fan of. And sure, while he was running it, so maybe he'll acclimate quicker to his peak in the NFL. But also, he did kind of just struggle and make a fair amount of mistakes running this pro-ish style offense at Alabama, and so it's like,
Well, he's had 15 starts in college too.
right, and
That's
which is another huge issue, right? Where it's like players with not as much time to start do tend to be a bigger question mark. I mean, we can even say that about Fernando Mendoza, right? Where it's like his total starting pedigree, I don't think is as high as you necessarily would want out of a guy you're thinking of taking number one overall. And so, I mean, that's kind of that's probably one of the main criticisms of Mendoza, right? But like, again, like, I guess like he's slightly more prepared for the NFL-ish offense because of what he ran at Bama, but I would like he struggled at Bama, which is what my concern is, and which is why I still am afraid of taking him in the first round. But I know there's probably a team that maybe wants the fifth-year option with a guy, and they think Ty Simpson could be that guy and take him. But I could understand teams not wanting the first-round risk, I guess, of that investment and taking him in like the second, which I think is realistically probably where he should be going.
I think he's a classic like Kyle Shanahan quarterback. where like you take him and then you trust the coach to maximize him in the scheme, like, especially early in the career. Like San Francisco would be a fantastic fit for his development, or a Kevin O'Connell. I doubt the Vikings will pull the trigger on him because that's for them. They're going into this going like Kyler and McCarthy, who wins. And just like I think you're just asking for trouble trying to invite yourself into a situation like that. But I do think that late in the first round, it just depends on what system he's going into.
Yeah.
And if you're picking him that late in the first round, I would say you have an established starter and you're picking him to be your backup. And at that point, it's like, why are we doing this in the first round?
Right. And so, like, again, if you're like,
it's still like a top 40 selection. There's still a ton of prospects at different positions where edge is falling. Like I just talked about TJ Parker. I get backup quarterback super important, but you just have Joe Flacco complaining about not getting a starting opportunity. Like you could instantly trade for him or somebody like that to be your backup for relatively cheap and try to build out the rest of the team. So for me, honestly, I'm probably not looking at Ty Simpson or Nussmeier until like mid-second, like early third. And if I don't get him by then, I'm not kicking myself. Like
and I feel like
at that point, I better had a quarterback strategy and not relying on getting one of these two guys.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're taking one of those two in the second or third, you're almost drafting those guys with the idea that like you're hoping that they could be a starter for you in the next year or two as like a productive NFL quarterback. Whereas teams like a guy like Shanahan is like they have their quarterback already. So in my head, the earliest you'd even really want to take a quarterback is maybe the fourth round, going into day 3, because again, it's like, I feel like we can develop a guy to be a solid enough backup. So we'll just take a guy that we think has the bare minimum and like NFL level IQ or mechanics or whatever to be a serviceable backup. And then we'll, get him up to speed at in that way, I guess, versus, Shanahan taking a second or a third on a quarterback. It's like, well, maybe like this guy could take over the Brock Purdy position, which is kind of like,
hey, I mean, crazier things have happened. Last year, we literally saw Shador fall to the 5th round. So I was trying to be conservative when saying these guys are going to be picked 2nd or 3rd round, if my guess. But like, I would not bat an eye if they're picked in the 4th because we just saw Shador got picked in the 5th. So
yeah, because especially around draft time, it's like with quarterbacks in particular too, we do get a lot of excessive hype, I think, about quarterback prospects in particular. I mean, sure, like Malik Willis is playing better now, but like I remember when he was in the draft, like the draft cycle or whatever, I think I saw him in a mock draft going like number 6 to the Raiders or something like that. And I'm like, that's how crazy some of this draft hype gets sometimes. And obviously I think he was either a late 2 or like a mid day 3 type pick, I think, when it came to actually getting drafted. And so, it's like guys get hyped up quite a bit during the draft process where people are thinking, quarterbacks get drafted higher. And I think Ty Simpson might be part of that. I mean, Will Levis, I think, was also hyped to potentially be a 1st-round pick. And so I know he was at the NFL draft.
Not the Mayo guy.
Yeah, I know he was at the draft when they were doing the 1st round or whatever, and he didn't get picked. And so he just sat around for a couple hours to not get picked, And I mean, that's just kind of how draft hype for quarterbacks goes. And it's like, and so it's just really hard to gauge how teams view the quarterback position. Plus, I remember we talked about over the course of this last season as well that the quarterback position, I think, is almost as strong as it's ever been, across the entire league of the NFL right now. I mentioned that there's 20-ish guys that I'd say are like at least decent enough to, I think that could be a serviceable enough starter to bring a team to at least the playoffs, provided the team around them is competent enough. Versus, I think the year prior, I was like, there's maybe 10 guys that I was comfortable with additional maybe 3 to 4 guys that I was like, maybe they could be the guy, but I'm not super sure about that. Which,
Yeah. Like guys like Jared Goff and Sam Darnold a couple years ago, we'd probably write them off for good. They're spearheading some of the best offenses in the league. So totally valid there, but have to do a deep discussion on like which how do we break the tiers of the quarterbacks at some point. But the show's gotten long enough. We hope you enjoyed what should have been a lighter topic, but it's all good fun. I enjoy this as always. So you can follow us at our Instagram channel at amon.a.mission down below. Yep. And our full length videos are on the YouTube channel, Amon Mission. Corstian, Draft Talk is on its way. It's here. And we got about approximately a month or less than that until the draft. Glad to see your excitement there.
Yeah.
What else do you got for the people?
You guys should read Project Hail Mary. It's a really good book. Also, peace.